Well, hello, SSDA Nation, and it's June 15th, the end of the COVID restriction day, and I thought maybe I'd end the year and part of our last email blast to you, talking about 12 things I learned from all of you this year, and I'd like to go through those with you, help you with some of your thought processes as you head off into the summer. Well, let's start out. I think one thing I learned is every year is a tough year when you're a leader. I mean, last year was really tough, but go back and there's been other years that are just as equally as tough. I think this year had more challenges and required more skill set, but there's been years where we've had you deal with strikes, some tragedies, um, transitions of staff. So that's what educational leadership's all about now. Is I find out every year's tough. You could have the crisis, you could have the war we had in 2004 through 8. Um, it's always tough. And I think for SSDA Nation, what I learned, I go back to a Bruce Springsteen song, you're just tougher than the rest. We're always prepared for a tough year. And this year was no different. I think the level of it was more challenging as far as something we haven't dealt with. But watch, next year will be another tough year. And that's just the way it is. And that's something I learned in talking to you and thinking about the last 30 years of my career. You know, we went from a 15% cut to the most money we've ever seen in front of us, and more to come. We just found out today there's 7 billion coming from the Fed, so you can buy more laptops and hotspots for schools that qualify. But I noticed behaviors changed. It's the first time I had a lot of you tell me that some of your staff, because it trickled down from a lot of state leaders, and there were some issues at the table or some pushback, and that's where great leadership takes place. But behavior changes when there's money and when there's a lot of people that are spoiled. And I think we've been a little spoiled this year and next year, and that's going to be challenge for you. One person once told me it's pretty easy to be a leader in 2012 because all you can say is no. You were cutting back and everybody came with you with ideas and you had to say no. So sometimes it's easier to lead when the times are tough. So don't shortchange yourself, as we talked about having good. And remember, I think it's like a spoiled person. Bruce Springsteen would also bring up one of his famous songs that a poor man wants to be rich, and then a rich man wants to be the king, and the king's not even satisfied when he owns and gets everything. And I think that's something you're going to have to deal with. You're going to have some very spoiled times where you're going to take care of a lot of great things, and it's tough to you to keep people humble. It is going to be a 2-3 year run where you have some plethora of money, and I watched this year how people did a great job maintaining that and not going overboard. You know, many people interview and talk and say this about students first, but I really think very few people actually mean it. It's just kind of like the nice thing to say. But SSDA leaders to the core are student focused. Do you have to battle and work with adult behaviors? Yes. Do you have to battle and deal with parents? Yes. And do you have to battle other things? Yes. But we would not have been open on the average 4.5 days after the pandemic, many of you without internet, if you didn't really care about the kids. Many of you applied for waivers because you wanted students to get back on your campuses, and you didn't listen to all the negative things that other districts were doing when it took them 10 to 12 weeks to get up and running just for distance learning. We even had districts this year that only went to school one day. So you are about student first. And I think even more so next year, I'm looking forward to seeing that and learning more about how you guys keep that on the front and center. So stealing from AXA, I mean, leadership really does matter. I mean, it absolutely matters to work on your leadership. You are stuffed with mandated this, plans here, LCAP, compliance, policy, and leaderships. They thrive not only on how to continue to lead in a really flexible student focus, despite all these mandates, but you actually thrive off crisis leadership. You like the challenge. SSDA Nation's gritty and tough. And I think the majority of you, if not all of you, have realized that leadership does matter, not only yourself, but your admin team, your lead teachers, your unions, and your boards. And it really does matter to have a great district, to have quality leadership. I many of us probably hundreds of times would ask people, how's it going? And I felt many times it's just part of like saying hello. And I started to really not take those three words for granted. I wanted to really listen to see how is it going. I think a lot of us go, how's it going? Oh, by the way, they better let people answer. And I think great leaders answer that question by not telling you what's going wrong, because that could be forever. But great leaders in SSDA Nation, I've loved so many times how many people, when I call them up and go, how's it going? They're going, oh, it's going fine, knowing that there's all kinds of problems going on. Many of you said it's going great. And that, again, is a sign of people that are stepping back and understanding how many people are watching you as a leader of an education district, but also people that are in leadership positions. Let's not take those words for granted when you ask people, how's it going? And try to get a response, because I think it is important that we stick together in this lonely profession. So another thing I learned this year is that I felt Zoom made me and a lot of my colleagues at SSDA just better leaders. I think we learned that we have been stuck in territorial leadership. That means you have to work only within, let's say, your district or your county office or your region, and that Zoom really opened that up. We had to wait sometimes for state conferences to do that, and I really think it made us leaders. It was a time saver. One of the complaints we all have is there's too many meetings. Well, when you add on commuting to different meetings, especially in small counties, huge time saver. Be interesting to see what happens in the future. I'm hoping that we continue at SSDA to have Zoom meetings, because I love seeing people from throughout the state being able to see each other more frequently than in March at our state conference. But also, I think it really makes you stronger to hear from other people and build colleagues that are not just within 20, 30 square miles of you. So I thought Zoom really upped my game as a leader. It allowed me to get more networking going on. Sure, do I miss the meetings face to face? Absolutely. But I think it made us a better leader. Learn from that. Really watched this year school boards in a crisis. And I really think we as associations have to really commend a lot of the boards for the pressure they took this year from all their community members, their constituents, the parents, and that the weak board leaders, staff relied on their weakness to take advantage of them and to pause on reopening, to ask for things that were not right, to go around the system. And the role of that during a crisis, the great boards did not change their leadership in a crisis. They actually got stronger. But I think collectively, what I've learned, we have to keep working with boards to help them understand their true role. And that is of leadership, not just driving policy and getting their fingers in areas they shouldn't be in. It's very hard to describe a hero because everything from a hero's within and how they rise at different moments. There's so many people in SSDA Nation that rose up and not only helped their district, but helped their colleagues, shared their best practices, asked for help. They're super selfish and humble, but threaded within all that are so many heroic teachers and staff that had to live in this world where everything's about the schools that weren't open while they were out already busting their tail open or in a hybrid model all year. And I really felt a lot of that stems from the leadership of the SSDA Nation and how you leaned in to rely on your heroes. A lot of heroes realize, or excuse me, a lot of leaders here realize you have to turn to heroic people when you need extra help, right? Sometimes it's unfair. The balance of what you're requiring of some of your top leaders and your heroes is tough. And then I think lastly, sometimes heroic things just occur. And I've heard so many stories this year where people really just stepped up and did something heroic for a kid or a family or for another staff member. Just amazing stuff to watch this year. I think this is a very difficult thing, and I observed this from so many of you this year, that it is a sign of strength, and it is one of the core parts of a confident leader is to ask for help. This is a complicated business and world we're in, and that your relationships pre-COVID and as you built during COVID, people started to realize that everyone has a certain strength. Some people need to hear from a person who's just so confident, they tell it like it is. Others need help with a plan. Many of us stay cocooned and they think leaders should not be asking for help. It is a sign of strength. It is a core philosophy of leadership is to work with other leaders and build your plethora, your stable, I guess you can say, together. And lastly, great leaders are thankful for those type of relationships. They're thankful that someone helps them and they're thankful for what they do for them. Saw so much of that this year. A lot of thank yous for help me with this, write this letter, do that. It was really, really a pleasure to see. We're all hired to be tough and to deal with stress. It's a question we ask almost every leader is, how do you deal with stress? Oh, I thrive off it. If I don't have stress, I might as well work on an assembly line. But I want you to know it's real. You're hired. This is always weird. You're hired because you're someone who can deal with the pressure, the stress, the anxiety, and it actually motivates you. But we all have a limit, right? You can't go multiple consecutive years, days, months with that type of intensity. Usually a stressor situation is super intense. You bust through it and you move on. When it drags on for 1, 2, 3 years, like we've seen with all the tragedies plus all the pandemic, that's tough. So I've learned this year and watched an SSDA Nation deal with stress. Super proud of you. Saw many people hit the wall that I've never seen. And I'm coming to the realization that it's real and that we've got to talk more openly about this. You know, I think some people, and you have to be, as a leader, when there's a real crisis, be really on top of your game and show the community that they can follow you. But I also think great leaders understand you can't only lead by fear. It's so easy to walk up there and say everyone's going to possibly die in the pandemic or just going to be a crisis, germs, budget cuts. Fear doesn't work long term, never has. You can do it short term, and it's easy actually to lead by fear because you're the boss. Great leaders find the moments to still continue to smile and laugh and be who they are. It's the true entree to wellness is watching people still maintain their sense of who they are. And usually they're very jovial, fun people, even in a crisis, they keep that going. I know for a fact, as we did some of our webinars, SSDA Nation forgot to have fun. So we added more happy hours and nighttime events together to get back to a laughing, smiling, knowing that's going to be okay. And that's part of a great leader. And then truly, I'm very humbled and honored to be the executive director. There are so many amazing people. Every time I get to step on a campus or on a Zoom call and talk to you guys, it's really an amazing thing. All year long, we had to hear from our presidents and our governors and our state leaders, hey, let's get kids back in school while you guys were already back in school. Most of you were back just about the whole year or most of the year. And we had to constantly hear these leaders go, we got to get more money to get kids back in school. Got to support kids getting back in school. Very disrespectful for people that were already back in school. And I think that's a sign of your guys' character, right? That the character of one is not to continually bash others, but just to take what world you can control and move it forward and be thankful. I love talking to some of you when I said, God, what a year. And they're saying, maybe one of my best years ever. Maybe one of my best. I said, what are you talking about? We implemented one-to-one computing. We watched people teach distance learning. We watched hybrid. We watched people step up. Most innovative, great year that I dealt with. That's a sign of one's great character. I love the fact that SSDA Nation, despite constantly being not thought of, I think, as all for all. I mean, all means all, excuse me, when we're talking about children. And we know that's not true when we watch leadership at the national and state level. And that politically constantly saying, let's get kids back to school was extremely, extremely disrespectful to the people that were back and worked hard to do that and do what's right for kids. And lastly, I just want to talk about 21, 22. Hope I have the right date on there. These days go by so fast. Don't let your staff dwell on last year, right? And especially the negative stuff. Everyone did their best. And it's time to move on. accent your accomplishments. If you read my takeaway, go back through your calendar and write all the things you accomplished as a school district and your schools. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. You'll have a laundry list of amazing things you accomplished. Were there some hiccups? Were there some bad board meetings? Sure, but that. And then lastly, I think mentally going into next year, you can't over prepare enough for the fall. You want to be super prepared and then be really prepared for another surprise. Let's hope there's not another pandemic. Let's hope there's not another major crisis. But been there 30 years, and I think we've always had one, some at different degrees. And you guys are tougher than the rest. And it's super honor to be your leader and look forward to next year. Hope you get a little downtime this summer, and hope we get to see each other very soon. Have a great summer, you guys. Take care.